It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. The sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and I was just trying to park my car at the local grocery store. Little did I know, this mundane errand was about to turn into a full-blown spectacle that would leave the entire town talking for weeks. I pulled into the parking lot, scanning for an empty spot. After a few moments, I spotted one near the entrance. Perfect. I signaled, checked my mirrors, and slowly backed into the space. As I turned off the engine and reached for my reusable shopping bags, I heard a deafening honk that sounded like a foghorn from hell. I flinched, my heart skipping a beat. Before I could even process what was happening, I saw in my rear VYEW mirror a massive, gleaming, obnoxiously oversized SUV, its headlights flashing like some kind of DVYNE warning. The driver, a middle-aged woman with oversized designer sunglasses and a scowl that could curdle milk, rolled down her window and unleashed a scream that could rival a banshee. "You stole my parking spot," she shrieked, her voice dripping with venom. I was waiting for that spot. I blinked, genuinely confused. There had been no other car near the spot when I pulled in. I had double-checked, even slowed down to make sure I wasn't cutting anyone off. But here she was, acting like I had personally robbed her of a family heirloom. "I'm sorry, but I didn't see you waiting," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I got here first." "Wrong move." Her mouth twisted into an expression that could only be described as a retail store manager summoning security. Her fingers clutched the steering wheel so tightly I thought the leather might disintegrate. "Oh, you not just say that," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I exhaled, already sensing where this was going. I had encountered people like her before, the kind who believed the universe revolved around them. The kind who thought rules were flexible suggestions meant for everyone but them. But I had never dealt with one in full-blown meltdown mode over something as trivial as a parking spot. I grabbed my coffee from the cup holder, took a sip, and tried to think of a way to defuse the situation before it got any worse. Unfortunately, Deborah, because, let's be honest, Deborah was not in the mood for diplomacy. "Move your car," she demanded, her tone so sharp it could cut glass. I stared at her. "What?" "You heard me. Move your car." I set my coffee down, glanced around at the growing audience of shoppers pausing to see what the commotion was about, and shook my head. No. That single word seemed to detonate inside her brain like a firework. She gasped, clutched her pearls. Yes, she was actually wearing pearls, and then started banging her fists against her steering wheel. "This is harassment. I was here first," she screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at me, as if she were presenting EVY Denke in a murder trial. "You weren't even in the lot when I pulled in," I countered. "Lies," she screeched. "I was circling." "Oh, so you weren't actually here? You were just floating around like a vulture." By now, people were definitely watching. A few teenagers were filming on their phones, probably already brainstorming TikTok captions. A guy in a baseball cap whispered something to his wife, who shook her head with a smirk. Even a little kid in a Spider-Man hoodie stopped mid-ice cream bite to gawk at the unfolding disaster. Deborah, however, was too locked in her fury to notice. "If you don't move your car in the next 5 seconds, I'm calling the police," she threatened, her voice laced with dramatic flair. I laughed. I actually laughed. "You're going to call the cops because you don't like where I parked." "You think this is funny?" she snapped, her face turning an impressive shade of red. "A little," I admitted. Her eyes narrowed into slits. For a second, I thought she was about to scream again. Instead, she threw her car into park, flung open the door, and stomped toward me with all the rage of an avenging angel. "Get out of the car," she demanded. "Yeah, that's not happening," I replied. "Get out, lady. I'm not about to fight you over a parking spot." Then, before I could react, she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. It happened so fast that I barely processed the impact at first. One moment, I was sitting there mildly amused. The next, my cheek was stinging, and the entire parking lot had gone dead silent. Someone gasped. A woman a few feet away audibly muttered, "Oh, she's done for." The kid in the Spider-Man hoodie shrieked, "Oh," like he was watching a WWE match. I slowly turned my head back to Deborah, who looked just as stunned as I felt. It was as if she had slapped me on instinct without thinking it through, and now she was scrambling to justify it. Then came the predictable move. She took a step back, clutched her chest, and gasped dramatically. "Oh my God, he attacked me," she cried. I blinked. Excuse me? He threatened me? I was defending myself. At this point, I was convinced said I was trapped in a bizarre alternate reality where logic ceased to exist. I rubbed my cheek, feeling the heat from the slap, and let out a disbelieving chuckle. You think people are going to believe that? I asked, gesturing to the onlookers, many of whom were still recording. Deborah, either oblivious or in full self-delusion mode, nodded furiously. Yes, you got in my space. You were aggressive. I let out a slow breath, trying to process the sheer absurdity of what was happening. And then, like any intervention, justice arrived in the form of two uniformed police officers strolling toward us. One of them, a tall, no-nonsense woman with a VY8 sunglasses, sighed deeply. "We saw everything," she said. Deborah froze. "What?" The officer nodded toward the parked patrol car, just a few feet away. "We were sitting right there. Watch the whole thing." Deborah's mouth opened and closed, resembling a fish gulping for air. I was. The second officer, a burly guy with a buzz cut, held up a hand. "Ma'am, you just slapped this man in broad daylight in front of witnesses." More silence. Deborah's brain Sibley struggled to compute. "Ma'am, you do realize that assault, right?" The first officer continued. Deborah's face drained of color. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Tell them I was just. It was a misunderstanding. You provoked me." I rubbed my cheek again, then shrugged. "Yeah, I don't think so." The second officer pulled out a notepad. "I'm going to need you to step aside, ma'am." Deborah gulped. Then, in true Deborah fashion, she made one final desperate play. "I need to speak to your manager," she howled. The first officer pinched the bridge of her nose. "Ma'am, this is law enforcement. We don't have managers." And that was when Deborah's composure shattered like a cheap wine glass. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Deborah stood frozen, her eyes darting between the two officers as if waiting for them to suddenly switch sides and start defending her. The crowd remained glued to the scene, cameras still recording, whispers spreading like wildfire. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the desperate calculations as she tried to figure out her next move. Then, like a switch had flipped, the tears started. Big, dramatic, award-winning sobs burst from her as she clutched her own face like she was the VY Tim. I was just trying to get a parking spot. This man, he was aggressive. He scared me. I was defending myself. One of the officers, the taller one with the VY8ers, sighed so deeply it sounded like she had just aged 10 years in a single breath. "Ma'am, we literally watched you slap him." Deborah's sobbing intensified. "You don't understand. I have a bad back. I can't be standing here like this. My doctor told me I shouldn't be under stress." The second officer, who had been jotting something down in his notepad, raised an eyebrow. "You didn't seem to have a bad back when you stormed out of your car to hit this guy." Deborah gasped, as if she had just been personally betrayed. She turned to me, her wet, mascara-streaked eyes locking onto mine with pure desperation. "Please, just tell them you won't press charges. We can just forget this happened." I stared at her, my cheek still stinging from the slap. "Oh, so now you want to forget it happened? Because 5 seconds ago, you were trying to get me arrested." She sniffled loudly. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was the heat of the moment. You can't ruin my life over one mistake. The officer with the notepad flipped to a fresh page. "Ma'am, we're going to need to see some identification." Deborah's hands flailed in the air like an over-caffeinated bird. "Oh my God, I can't believe this. This is harassment. I pay taxes. My husband is a lawyer." I almost laughed. Of course, she had a lawyer husband. That was the ultimate Deborah defense. She probably had his number saved under get out of trouble card. The officers exchanged looks, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, we're not arresting you," the first officer explained, her patience wearing thin. We just need to document this for the report. Hand over your ID. Deborah hesitated. It was obvious she was debating whether she should keep arguing or just comply. After a long moment, she let out a sharp huff, stomped back to her SUV, yanked open the door, and rummaged through her designer purse with exaggerated frustration. When she finally pulled out her wallet, she practically threw her ID at the officer like a toddler throwing a tantrum. As the officer examined the license, Deborah crossed her arms. You know, I should really be the one pressing charges. This whole thing is ridiculous. I have places to be. I have things to do. From the other side of the parking lot, a voice called out, yeah, like slapping strangers in broad daylight. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Deborah's face turned red again. Shut up, she shrieked at the unseen heckler. The officer jotted something down and handed the ID back. Ma'am, we're going to write up a citation for disorderly conduct and assault. Deborah's whole body stiffened. A citation? You're fining me. The officer nodded. Unless the gentleman here wants to press charges, then we can escalate it. Deborah spun toward me so fast I thought she might get whiplash. Oh my God, you wouldn't. I rubbed my cheek thoughtfully. I mean, I could. Assault is kind of a big deal. She stared at me, her eyes bulging, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. No, 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 no. Look, let's be reasonable. We don't need to get the courts involved. I shrugged. I don't know, Deborah. You were pretty adamant about calling the police earlier. Shouldn't we follow through? She made a strangled noise that was somewhere between a whimper and a scream. Please. Look, I'll pay for your coffee. I'll even give you a gift card. The way she said it, you'd think she was offering me gold bars. One of the officers cleared their throat. Sir, what do you want to do? I took a long pause, letting Deborah sweat for a moment. Then finally I sighed. You know what? I won't press charges. Deborah's entire body sagged with relief. Oh, thank God. But, I continued, I am definitely not letting this go. Her face twitched. What does that mean? I pointed toward the crowd. I mean, there are at least 20 people here who caught this on camera. You're probably going VY as we speak. Her entire soul seemed to leave her body. Her head snapped toward the crowd, scanning for the nearest phone. And oh, she shrieked, delete it. Delete all of it. The teenager closest to her just laughed. Lady, that's not how the internet works. Deborah spun in a circle, looking for anyone who would help her. And that's when another figure appeared, jogging toward us from across the lot. It was a man, maybe late 40s, wearing a suit that looked like it had been bought off a discount rack and left in a car for a week. His tie was crooked, and his hair was slightly disheveled. Oh no, I muttered under my breath. Deborah's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Steve, she wailed, rushing toward him like he was her last hope. Steve, clearly already aware of what was happening, stepped forward with an air of forced authority. All right, everyone calm down. I am Deborah's legal representative, and I demand to know what's going on here. The officers exchanged glances. The taller one sighed, clearly unimpressed. Sir, who are you? I am Deborah's lawyer, he announced, puffing out his chest. Deborah nodded furiously. That's right. My husband is an attorney, and he will not stand for this. Steve coughed. Boyfriend. But yes, I am an attorney. The officer with a notepad frowned. You got a bar license on you? Steve's confidence flickered. A what? A license, the officer repeated. To practice law. There was a beat of silence. Steve glanced at Deborah. Deborah looked at Steve. Then, finally, Steve let out a nervous chuckle. I mean, I don't have a license, per se, but I have watched every episode of Law & Order. The crowd lost it. Laughter exploded from every direction. Someone actually doubled over, gasping for air. Even the officers had to bite back smirks. Deborah's jaw dropped. Steve, she hissed, looking like she was about to strangle him. Steve raised his hands defensively. I thought I could fake it. The officer pinched the bridge of her nose. I'm officially done with today. Deborah let out a strangled noise of pure frustration, staring at Steve like he had personally ruined her life. But the damage was done. She was getting fined. She was being recorded. And now her fake lawyer had just turned the whole situation into a public circus. And the best part? The real fallout hadn't even started yet. Deborah stood there, seething, her face shifting between rage, disbelief, and sheer panic as the laughter around her continued. Steve, her so-called legal representative, had just obliterated whatever thin credibility she had left, and she knew it. The crowd was eating up every second of her downfall. Phones were still recording, capturing her absolute destruction in real time. But despite the overwhelming EVY denke, Deborah was not the type to admit defeat. No, she was the type to double down, even when she was already sinking. "This isn't over," she suddenly screeched, her voice wobbling between anger and desperation. "I'll see you in court." I almost choked on my own breath. In court? Over what? You slapped me in the middle of a parking lot. There are 20 VY deos of it. What exactly do you think is going to happen? Her eyes darted around wildly, as if searching for an answer. Then she straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and put on the same smug, entitled expression she probably used to get her way at restaurants. "I will sue you for defamation. You have humiliated me, and I will not stand for this. You have no idea who you're messing with." The officer who had been handling the situation sighed, VY Sibley exhausted. "Ma'am, suing someone requires actual grounds. You publicly slapped him in broad daylight. He didn't do anything to defame you. You did this to yourself." Deborah clenched her jaw, her breathing erratic. But then, like she had just thought of the perfect last-minute excuse, her eyes lit up with a new idea. I have trauma. That's right. This whole incident has caused me severe emotional distress. I'll be suing for damages." The teenager recording next to me nearly dropped his phone laughing. "Lady, you just assaulted someone and got caught lying to the cops. What judge is going to take you seriously?" Deborah's mouth twisted into a snarl, but she quickly forced herself to adopt a pitiful, wounded expression. "But I have a bad back and my anxiety. I can't go through this level of stress. I need compensation for what this has done to me." Steve, who had been standing awkwardly to the side, suddenly perked up and tried to save the situation. Yes, exactly. As her, legal ad VY Sayer, I strongly suggest we take this to CIVYL court and demand financial retribution." The officer gave him a deadpan look. "Sir, you just admitted you're not a lawyer." Steve gulped, then adjusted his tie like that somehow made him more legitimate. "Okay, but I know a guy who used to work in a courthouse. He can totally give us pointers." At this point, even Deborah looked like she regretted VYing Steve. But she wasn't about to back down, now not with all these people watching. She turned back to me, her eyes filled with venomous determination. "You're going to regret this," she hissed. I shrugged. "Doubt it." She let out a dramatic gasp, then turned on her heel and stormed back toward her SUV, probably expecting some kind of powerful, VY-torious exit. But fate, as always, had other plans for her. In her rage-fueled march, she didn't notice the stray shopping cart rolling behind her. 1 second, she was stomping off like a VY lane in a soap opera. And the next bam, her foot caught the cart, and she tripped spectacularly, flailing like a windmill before face-planting onto the asphalt. The entire parking lot erupted. Laughter exploded from every direction. People gasped, some wheezed from laughing too hard, and the teenager with the phone managed to yell, "World Star!" before collapsing into hysterics. Deborah, now flat on the ground, let out a shriek of pure humiliation. "This is unfair." Steve rushed over to help her up, but even he couldn't suppress his smirk at how ridiculous she looked. Her sunglasses had flown off. Her expensive purse had spilled onto the pavement, and her perfectly styled hair was now a disaster. The officer rubbed her temples. "Ma'am, I think we're done here." But Deborah wasn't done. Oh no. She scrambled to her feet, adjusted herself, and did the only thing left in her arsenal of bad decisions. She made a beeline for the courthouse. A few weeks later, I found myself sitting in an actual courtroom, watching Deborah attempt to sue me. The moment she stepped up to the stand, she flipped into full dramatic mode. "Your Honor," she wailed, sniffling dramatically, "I have suffered greatly because of this incident. My reputation has been destroyed. My friends have turned on me. I can't even show my face in my favorite yoga studio anymore." The judge, an older man who had probably seen every ridiculous case imaginable, raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, it says here you're suing for emotional distress, property damage, and wrongful humiliation." Deborah nodded furiously. Yes, that's right. That man ruined my life." The judge turned to me. "And your side of the story?" I gestured toward the massive projector screen at the side of the courtroom. "I brought some EVY Denke." Deborah VY Sibley paled. A lawyer I had barely even needed pressed a button, and suddenly every single angle of the incident started playing. The slap, the meltdown, the absurd lawyer reveal, and of course the dramatic shopping cart trip. The courtroom filled with awkward silence, punctuated by a few snorts of laughter. The judge sighed, rubbing his eyes like he had officially lost all faith in humanity. "Ma'am, this is absurd." Deborah jumped to her feet. But Your Honor, he provoked me. He ruined my day." The judge looked at her, completely unimpressed. "You do realize that publicly slapping someone and then filing a lawsuit over your own embarrassment is not how the law works." Deborah sputtered. But Case dismissed. The gavel slammed down, and that was it. It was over. Deborah let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a wail. "No!" Steve, standing beside her, muttered. "Well, that went terribly." Deborah spun on him. "This is your fault, Steve." "My fault? You're the one who slapped a guy in front of cops." The courtroom started clearing out, but I stuck around just long enough to see Deborah storm toward the exit, muttering something about appealing to a higher core, whatever that meant. Outside, I took a deep breath, stretched my arms, and felt the kind of satisfaction that only comes from watching karma do its job. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a notification. One of the VY Deos of Deborah had gone VY RAL, 5 million VYUs and counting. The title, "Deborah Gets Instant Justice Must Watch." I chuckled to myself, unlocked my car, and drove off, Leah VYing behind a courtroom, a furious Deborah, and an internet legacy that would haunt her forever. In the weeks that followed, Deborah became an internet sensation, but not in the way she had hoped. Memes of her meltdown flooded social media, and a hashtag, "the parking lot Karen," trended for days. Her face was everywhere, from TikTok compilations to late-night talk show monologues. Steve, her fake lawyer boyfriend, tried to distance himself from the debacle, but the internet wasn't VYing it. Clips of his Law of Order confession were turned into endless remixes, and he became a running joke in legal circles. As for me, I went back to my normal life, but with a newfound appreciation for the power of patience and the importance of always checking for shopping carts. Deborah, on the other hand, learned the hard way that the internet never forgets. And as for her lawsuit, let's just say she's still waiting for that higher court to call her back. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.